discussion if the hall, the people permit has having discussion, because it's turning out to be a wonderful webinar all said and done. Pramod, we'll go on with your discussion, with your presentation.
Can you see the screen?
Yeah, we can see the screen and we can hear you also.
Yeah, good. So good evening, and thanks Mahesh and Partha and IOSO for giving me this opportunity. So the vitrectomy for retinal vascular occlusion, they have a specific indications like non-clearing vitreous hemorrhage, fractional detachment, or combined retinal detachments. You have epiretinal membrane, vitreomacular traction, macular hole. These are typically indications for any vascular retinopathy. Nothing much different except probably neovascular glaucoma. We need to look at it, and also sometimes have tractional macular hole in this group of diseases. Again, goal of the surgery is same, to clear the media opacity, relieve all the traction, and most important, what you are looking at, it reduce the ischemic drive and stabilize the eye by removing all the scaffolds, and do a laser or anterior retinal cryopexy if needed, because these are the eyes we need to go quite aggressively. Otherwise, most of, as Dr. Giridhar suggested, eventually, otherwise, sometimes they can land up in neovascular glaucoma and painful blind eye. So also, there are few reports that effect of vitrectomy, probably it helps you to increase the transport of oxygen to ischemic area and thereby help in clear the VEGF and cytokine, and probably help in some amount of reduction in a macular edema as well. So pre-operative evaluation, just the standardized things, but what you need to look for a rubeosis iris is an angle neovascularization, because that is going to change your management plan and also extend configuration of detachment, vitreous attachments if you can make out, and that will help you to plan your strategy. And if you have extensive fibrovascular proliferation or rubeosis or angle neovascularization, you probably would like to give anti-VEGF before starting your surgery. Ultrasonography, as usual, useful in any media eye where you have a media opacity, to look for a location and configuration of detachment, vitreous attachments, or vitreous membranes, if any. So basic standard vitrectomy steps are same, but what we need to look at some additional steps here, probably ILM peeling will be more aggressively if you are doing, if you have macular hole or macular edema or attraction. Sometimes you need to add buccal, particularly because of your peripheral membranes are there and traction cannot be removed. And occasionally you may need retinotomy or retinectomy, and eyes with NVG, we may have to combine vitrectomy with a glaucoma drainage implants. So certain practical issues when you deal with these eyes are, you have a very, very dense vitreous hemorrhage. We'll show one of the cases like that. Polyp is extremely flat most of the time with a firm attachment, and retina is because of ischemic, as against when you see in a diabetic TRDs. So you need a very meticulous dissection and very, very high risk of iatrogenic breaks. And also sometimes, as I said, polyp is more peripheral. So hence sometimes you need to take a call whether to dissect it or leave it and maybe support with a buccal, or case to case, we're going to decide that. And this is just where to start. Generally, typically you see reasonably dense vitreous hemorrhage, visibility is not compromised. You just start with the near the sclerotomy and then slowly move forward. And as you go beyond, this is another case by case we'll go through. This is a 60-year-old male, diabetic, hypertensive, superior temporal BRVO. This is one of the probably simplest cases. You have a single isolated attachment here and attachment to the disc. Complete the vitrectomy, this superior temporal branch occlusion. Technically, surgery is almost simpler, except those two attachments. Trim this polyp. Basically, hemorrhage was because of tug on this blood vessel. There's not much vascular activity. And once you trim this one, job is done and patient got back excellent vision. This is another eye having 60-year-old female, diabetic, hypertensive again, having a CME with a, obviously is a traction component, already had a laser. So again, option was obviously vitrectomy. Again, Tricart was, though after initial vitrectomy, Tricart was used to induce the PVD. And you realize there was no PVD, but lucky for me, that it came out very easily. But what happened when you induce this PVD? Try to avoid inducing on the temporal side or on macular side because there is significant tug. And when you get here, this case just started coming up on its own before I realized it was separated here on the macula also, and as well as this polyp also came up on easily. And then it become very easy to remove this off. And most of the time, as we know, that this polyp and this fractional component is due to cicatricial changes and when fibrosis starts. So, sorry. This is another case, 55-year-old female. And what you see is like ischemic superior retina exactly along the vessel. The polyp is firmly adherent, little bit elevation. Okay. You ensure that you remove the fibrovascular polyp bridging traction from the edge of the polyp to the vitreous base. Otherwise, they don't do well generally. And then you go on peeling the membrane over the macular area. And subsequently, I could peel that from the disc. And generally, you start at the disc and go towards the periphery because this acts as a fulcrum here. And best way now to deal with these eyes, particularly when you do a membrane peeling, bimanual dissection, I think we are most of us are very, very comfortable now. And what is happening here, you see the extent of these membranes are far beyond than what actually visible membrane. So you need to keep this in mind, go beyond that, identify the edge, and then work your way forward. So once you clean this area, those tentacles, then you lift over the disc. I trim this thing, and then rest of the part we showed. There was significant bleeding on this vessel because this polyp is sitting right on the vessel and it gives way sometime. And these are major blood vessels and it can be sometimes very troublesome. I could stop it only by having a mechanical traction, pressing the cutter there for a while, hold it, raise the bottle height, stop the vitreous surgery. And then once I could get the bleeding under control, proceed further. And this is the most difficult part, which is firmly adherent. Then you have a blood clot around it, but ensure that this traction is relieved, this bridging vitreous is removed. And like ultimately, I left small but residual membrane and this clot as much as we could, but I knew underlying retina is ischemic. And if you try to remove entire clot, I would tear the retina there. Eventually, it is going to get absorbed. So I left it at 40 like that. This is another case, having a macular hole, and because of traction, you have a localized detachment here because of that. And this is a typical, again, superior temporal vessel, firm, flat, polyp, fibrotic. Okay, very difficult to get the edge. Here, actually, I was using this 25 gauge cautery tip to just create that vitreous schisis edge lifting up. Membrane is here, edge, the visible edge, but that other edge going beyond this. And once you get that edge, then start separating around. Partly I could get it. And then once all around those tentacles are freed, I could pull this membrane right on the disc. The difficulty here is because retina is mobile, you don't have counter traction. If you try to pull too much, I didn't want to create tear here. This part came out easily. Sounds very easy. You get excited, but then once you reach this part, end of this polyp, and this was firm attachment. And ultimately, while removing this, though I could dissect, but I created two tiny iatrogenic breaks here. This is what came up, and then I started bleeding here. Managed to control the bleeding, and eventually, ultimately, we did ILM peeling in this case. Patient did well, achieve 6/18 vision at the end, and maintaining that vision now. Yes, sometimes we need to do retinotomy because see this flat polyp firmly adherent, and once you create one underneath, and sometimes this is a typical also you see with a retinal macroaneurysm along with that, and it's becomes sometimes whole thing one single unit, and there's no way you can separate it. You have sometimes associated subretinal hemorrhage, interretinal hemorrhage, and superficial. This whole thing a single sandwich. So you just cut around and settle it down. Fortunately, it was on a nasal side, so it helped didn't compromise the final visual outcome. This is another case, and this is what I was talking about. Elderly lady, diabetic, hypertensive, dense vitreous hemorrhage. I mean, these are very typically you see in occlusion. This is what like old dense vitreous hemorrhage. More commonly, you see these and a vascular occlusion. She had a CRVO, sorry. And this is again coming out as you see, alter blood, old one, indicating view. Yes, this is the last case. I'm stopping after this. And keep on dissecting out. And what you look at is see like a murky material coming out. Whole blood is stuck to the retina here. Layer by layer, you remove it. But generally, these are the eyes. Though technically surgery you can complete, you need to have a lot of patience. Peripheral blood, as you see again, is that. But eventually, final visual outcome is not really that great. So maybe there are multiple cases. I think I will stop here. This is just had a tractional macular hole. These are just Mahesh wanted to talk about our result. Just to summarize, I could pull out last 2 years, seeing some 25 patients had TRD and 16 had CRD. But what we could realize is when you look at the improvement, these are like almost 100% cases have iatrogenic break while dissecting in a CRD, and almost 70 to 75% cases in a branch vein occlusion while peeling the membrane. But eventually we could get reasonably good functional outcome, better in a tractional combined detachment than the tractional detachment. Probably tractional detachment may be longer duration. Just stop here. I just would like to acknowledge my colleagues, Sukarma and Shilpa, my fellows, and Rajiv and Chetan for sharing these results and video with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pramod, for the wonderful videos and wonderful presentation. So this is what I want to highlight, that the vitrectomy for vein occlusions is a different ballgame as compared to a diabetic vitrectomy, because diabetic eyes do have some patches of normally functioning retina which are perfused, but in a vein occlusion, that whole area is not perfused, giving rise to increased risk of iatrogenic breaks and the hyaloid being densely adherent to the retina. So I have taken about like 10 minutes of permission from the hall coordinators for discussion. So are there any questions or any comments on the previous 2 lectures, including Avinash? I have questions for the panel, like say for instance, the patient presents with 6/6 vision, no macular edema, but a CRVO which is evolving. Would you inject in these patients in an attempt to abort the CRVO process? Dr. Giri or Dr. Lalit?
Oh, I will not do that. I mean, basically, I don't know. I don't think there is any evidence to tell us.
Mahesh, in these cases, we will not inject. Rather, what I do is investigate for the etiological factor, because that is when we need to identify the etiological factor and avoid or treat the etiological factor. Then usually it regresses. What Avinash showed in one of the cases, the hemorrhages are there and it has resolved. It is at that stage.
Would you consider systemic steroids? Any of you would consider systemic steroids at this point in time, even if it is not a young patient who is just about evolving CRVO? Would you consider systemic steroids in an attempt to abort the occlusion?
No, I don't think so. Unless there is an inflammatory component, never. Systemic steroids, no?
Yes, systemic steroids, yes.
I will not. Lalit?
No, young patients, I would, because we had done one study long time back, CRVOs less than 40 years. So 1/3 we found inflammation, 1/3 we didn't find anything. So where we didn't find anything, we did empirically try steroids and it did not work out.
Avinash, any thoughts?
No, so what I would think is when a patient has an evolving, I don't inject immediately in these patients, but
not injection, systemic. He's asking systemic steroids.
Systemic I don't do unless it's an inflammatory etiology. So if I just follow up these patients very closely if they are 20/20, and probably on a weekly basis I follow and look out for more evolution of the evolution of the vein occlusion itself, and also follow the macular thickness very closely in these patients, including the center of the fovea and in the peri and the parafoveal area. And if there are any changes where we can see a documented increase in the thickness, we all know the earlier intervention in central retinal vein occlusion associated macular edema has the best prognosis. So that's the time when I can go for intervention.
You mentioned
Mahesh,
about three. Yes,
Mahesh, what will you do?
yes, yes.
What will you do? I'm asking you.
Like Avinash said, I would usually follow the patient up every week. So at the earliest incidence of edema which is happening, I would inject, because I have had instances, younger patients, yes, I would empirically treat them with steroids also, because we have managed to abort the CRVO from progressing. So that also we have managed. But of course, it's not too much of an evidence to say that. But we assume it could be a papillophlebitis and treat them empirically if it is a younger patient. Raju, you want to add anything?
No, sir, it's fine. I was about to tell about papillophlebitis because that was a term which was used
Yes.
before, and that warranted the use. Like the steroid was used, but currently systemic steroids we don't give in these cases. A regular follow-up is something which we'll do.
Those are the cases, Rajiv, we used to see in 2 weeks' time it worsens like anything. So we used to give steroids in those cases.
Mhm.
Nowadays, we are not even coining the term papillophlebitis.
Avinash, you mentioned about 3 different types of retinitis, if I remember right, or the inflammation between along the vessel or before that or like posterior to that. What is the significance?
There's no clinical significance terms in form of it's just a clinical observation where it's the retinitis sometimes can be completely engulfing the vessel, or can be seen distal to the vessel, or can be seen proximal to the vessel. So if you want to really dissect and see where the clinical information, if you add, suppose the other day we got to see a patient who had a younger patient who had a vascular occlusion. The fellow totally missed picking up retinitis in the periphery. So that's where in a young, when we see a sclerosed vessel, it's important that you follow it up till the end so that we don't miss an underlying cause.
Okay, and also you mentioned about the hemorrhages associated with arteriovenous crossings and not arteriovenous crossings as a distinction to say that like hypercoagulability versus the vessel wall. But in a CRVO, it starts at the disc, isn't it? So how would you make that distinction in that situation, in a CRVO?
So in CRVO, we will not be able to see the deeper intraretinal hemorrhages to start off with. It's mainly superficial hemorrhages, you're correct. But if you look into when it, this is what I observed actually, which is not there, which people don't talk about it. That's the reason why the initial manifestation of central retinal vein occlusion presents with superficial hemorrhages, even plenty of superficial hemorrhages, is the least reliable factor for us to make a distinction that it is going to be an ischemic component or not. So that we are already aware. We don't count on the hemorrhages alone to make it whether it's ischemic or not. But if you look into those indeterminate cases where anytime 6 or 9 months later, which transgresses to the ischemic component from non-ischemic, it goes to the ischemic component. You will see the change in the pattern of hemorrhages. They are not so, they are never superficial anymore. Then you get to see intraretinal hemorrhages, round and blot hemorrhages. You get to see in these patients. That's a very good clinical sign that this patient can go in for an ischemic progression. So superficial hemorrhages, I would not say in acute setting, superficial hemorrhages would make us diagnose the CRV, but never help to find out ischemic or not. But in the chronic state, the deeper hemorrhages would help us to make towards a progression towards ischemic component.
Actually, he brought out a good point that the number of hemorrhages never indicate whether it is ischemic or non-ischemic. In before, long back, we used to do the ERG, the B by A wave and their amplitude to determine ischemia. Nowadays, no one is doing actually. How many of you are still doing ERG to determine whether it is ischemic, non-ischemic, or indeterminate?
We're not
We
really
used to
doing.
identify this.
I agree, because like it's either way, it's a kind of blunderbuss treatment where we give anti-VEGF. So anti-VEGF is the treatment for everything. So that's the reason.
We have stopped using our brain.
Possibly, we are not probably doing a thing. ERG for all of it. Madam Raji, you want to say something either?
Just 2 things I wanted to add. One is this recurrent vein occlusions. If you are getting I think you have already covered that you should have a suspicion of inflammatory, or it may be probably a blood dyscrasias related. Waldenstrom also can present, but more classical is a disproportionate neurosensory detachment. So if you do OCT in this Waldenstrom, you'll get a huge neurosensory detachment and not much macular edema. So I think again, blood dyscrasias and uveitic type or inflammatory origin, you should think more if you're getting a recurrent vein occlusion. And nasal occlusions, again, that is something more classical in an inflammatory pathology. You don't get usually nasal occlusions in acquired cause.
Sure. Are there any other comments or discussion? I think we
One
can go
question
on.
I wanted to clarify, because Avinash showed one very good slide of combined block. So what is the general approach in a patient who has a combined vascular block, arterial plus venous? Avinash?
Yeah, the first thing I like to rule out is SLE is the first disease I would like to rule out in this. So the moment I get to see a patient, and if SLE is, then I look into possibility even a little bit of hypercoagulable states, and even homocystinemia is another condition which I will try to rule out in these conditions. But SLE and primary aplar toxicity.
The present situation,
Even
you
for
also
discus-
should be thought about again.
Yeah, just wanted to ask one thing from panelists. In the current thing, when we know that there is increased thrombosis with COVID, in your workup, do you feel any other test should be added? Because no, it's not the young or old, because many times even old who have a known risk factor of diabetes, hypertension, hypercholesterolemia, we are seeing definitely more cases of vein occlusions now.
Yes.
So do you feel that routinely we don't do, but these cases, role of D-dimer, though it is at a later stage, but there are reports that even vein occlusions have increased D-dimer, and they say it is 7 times more in the tears. So I was wondering whether do you feel any of these tests will help us in some other way?
But even if
think
you
D-dimer
diagnose it
is
as
something-
COVID, sorry, please go ahead, Arvind.
I think they want us to stop, I guess.
Yeah, they want to go home.
No, the reason of finding, though your management will not change, but probably giving more risk of systemic thrombosis if it is related to
Yes.
COVID.
No, I think
So-
the management would change, Rajiv, because if the D-dimer continues to be elevated in few of those patients, though they might sometimes dip down to normal, again they can escalate. So that's an indication that they have to be on, depending on how much it is, either on enoxaparin or they have to be an oral anticoagulant at that point of time. So, yeah.
So is it making sense now that we should do routinely
I think we should.
a D-dimer in these cases?
Yeah,
COVID
I think-
era,
Yeah, because we are seeing a lot of
Thrombocytopenia,
cases.
D-dimer.
Rajiv, we are seeing a lot of cases in the clinic that they are cured of COVID and they are coming, we are negative. Negative doesn't mean anything to us.
See,
I'm
actually, in
really
the
sorry
pre-COVID
to
era,
To
interrupt
add
with this,
this-
sir, but we will have